ownership is shifting and thinking about all the little things. We're seeing companies like Masterworks where you do it with art. We're seeing companies like Here where you can do it with short-term rental properties, or Picasa, like you can do it with long-term rental properties. But historically, these are things where you have to have millions of dollars to invest in. Now you can have $100 or $10,000 and get a piece of it instead of having to own the full thing.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. 20-Minute Leaders is a proud supporter of Make-A-Wish Israel and Tech to Peace, and is in proud collaboration with Fiat Ventures, J Ventures, Riverside FM, Fusion VC, Birthright Excel, J Impact, Leap, Google for Startups, and Hippo, and in media partnership with Fintech. Welcome to another episode of 20-Minute Leaders. I'm excited to talk to Drew Glover, founding partner of Fiat Growth and general partner at Fiat Ventures, about Fintech and where we're at today. He is no stranger to the world of growth, technology, and marketing. From his time at Steady, where he led marketplace development and growth, to namely Fjord and Portal A, he navigated the ins and outs of go-to-market strategies and user acquisition. Meet Drew. Drew Glover, welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. I'm so excited to talk to you about Fiat Growth, Fiat Ventures, Fintech, and everything in between. Thank you very much for being here.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me, Michael.
You know, Fintech space growing like crazy. So many different things to tackle, so many different elements that we're trying to change in the way that we're thinking about finances, whether it's financial literacy, the way we manage our daily finances, the gig economy versus the traditional economy, different solutions from centralization to decentralization. I can't even wrap my head around all the different things that we have today to work on. And so I'm excited to pick your brain a little bit in these 20 minutes about where your passion lies and how you see this domain. But starting from your work with Fiat Growth and now Fiat Ventures, I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey and your world into fintech.
Yeah, most definitely. Fiat Growth was founded a little over 4.5 years ago by myself and my co-founder, Alex Harris. Fiat Growth is the industry-leading growth consultancy for early stage and late stage fintech companies, where we help them scale. We are the strategy and the execution around building the pipes and the foundation around all things growth and performance marketing. So around 4 years ago, Alex and myself, we started Fiat Growth. We'd known each other for 20 years. We both went to UC Berkeley together. Funny story, I actually played football there and he was an equipment manager there, and we just became fast friends. And so fast forward many years later, he was working at Chime, at the very large neobank, and he was head of growth and partnerships there. I was head of growth and partnerships at Steady, which helps folks in the 1099 world improve their financial health. And we started co-advising a number of companies together. And what we quickly realized is that so many, especially fintech companies, because they have such complex funnels, like the trust and what you need to be able to pull out of a customer for them not only to sign up for a bank, but to ultimately open up an account and fund that account. It's a very complex process and involves a lot of growth expertise. So we started, we quit our day jobs, we founded Fiat Growth and had a fairly unique model where we would not only get a retainer for our services, but we'd also ask for advisory shares and we'd get equity, or we'd ask for the right to invest in every company we worked with. That quickly scaled up. Today we have 25 full-time employees, and we basically oversee all partnerships and influencer marketing on one side of the business. And then the other side of the business is all performance marketing. So that's building out your MarTech stack, it's funnel optimization, it's owning all your different paid channels. But what was really exciting is over time, that right to invest that we got with all of our contracts gave us the ability and the option to invest in any company that we were working with hands-on that we thought were going to be outsized winners in the space. And it gave us the ability to choose if we wanted to invest in them or not. So in 2021, we raised a $15 million venture fund, and which gave us the ability and the flexibility to kind of pick and choose the companies that we already worked with on the Fiat Growth side, the consultancy, of which ones we wanted to invest in. So taking a quick step back there, Fiat Growth is not only this incredible growth consultancy where we are the full strategists and executors of all things growth, think of us as a turnkey or outsourced CMO. But it also doubles as one of the best due diligence arms in the business, because we're able to work with the companies prior to investment, which is really hard to do in early stage venture. And on the venture fund, we get to invest in them. So we're typically investing in pre-seed to call it Series A companies, typically trying to get like a small percentage of the business. But the really exciting part is we just have this unprecedented access to venture, especially in the early stage, that the traditional VC doesn't, because we get to work with the client prior to investment. So we understand the founders, the product, the innovation behind it, if they can scale, if the users love the product or not. And then we can make a decision if we actually want to deploy capital and invest into them.
Fantastic. So many more data points, much more intentionality behind obviously those early investments. And since they're all about the team, you get to actually experience the team in a very meaningful way before deploying the capital. Tell me about the focus on fintech as a decision point for you.
Yeah, so a lot of it came organically when Alex and myself were at previous fintechs, and we were working at consumer fintech. So Chime has, I don't know, somewhere between 10 million and 15 million users today, the fastest growing digital bank of all time. And Steady has, I don't know, around 5 or 6 million users. But while we were building up those communities, we were really realizing that we're entering this golden age of fintech. It's the next evolution of innovation within that space. Historically, we all grew up with banks that had brick and mortar stores. We all remember being, 13 or 14 or 15, walking in with your parent, opening up your first account, and that kind of being this moment in our lives, where now anyone can sign up for a bank account digitally without having to go into a brick and mortar service. And therefore, by these companies being able to save all this money on the overhead of having to purchase real estate, they can invest that money back into the business. So what we just saw is that there was this opportunity, because we all are holding these phones in our hands on a day-to-day basis, to bring financial technology into the hands of everyone. And once the mobile revolution really hit its peak, where literally everyone has a cell phone and everyone has access to cell phones, everyone has access to internet, it became this opportunity to start really thinking and innovating around what the future of finance looks like. That was really interesting and compelling to Alex and myself at the time. And obviously we're incredibly proud in terms of us kind of following that instinct, because what fintech is today, it's not only redefining how our parents and our great grandparents and even us knew of what fintech was, call it 10, 20, 30 years ago, but we're also on the forefront of being able to see how future generations look at fintech, being Gen Z, high schoolers, college students, even the 5-year-old to the 10-year-old. But there's going to be a new generation around the relationship with finances. And we're very much looking through that window, and it's looking really, really compelling.
And so is this sort of a convergence on where the big impact is today? So you're mentioning that we have this whole new generation that's just managing finances in a completely different way. And so there's a variety of solutions that need to come into place. But even there, we have a wide spectrum of different solutions that may go in there. Are you more excited about specific ones, specific verticals within this new fintech world that you're particularly, convicted on, that this is where we should be today?
Yeah, I mean, I could spend hours talking about this, but just to quickly name a few. One is just the convergence of fintech with a lot of these other industries that aren't historically a fintech partner. For example, the future of work and how people work in the near future here, it's continuing to shift. We talk about the proliferation of the gig economy, like Uber and Lyft. We talk about the creator economy, where, we're seeing 7-year-olds to 18-year-olds becoming huge influencers online and making a lot of money just based on creating content. But the way we think about finances now, or way we used to think about finances is, hey, if you have money, come here and we'll help you open up a checking and savings account.
Right.
Where today, if you're making money, there's all these different ways that you should be managing it. And people that are younger are making more money now. So It's really around how can we bring together both how you're earning money based on the jobs you're having, connecting that with your bank and giving you much more insight into the words you said earlier, financial literacy. So as you're earning money, you can also learn about money and you can also learn how to set yourself up for the future. So again, like I think the future of work and how people work and how that connects to your bank account's huge. I think the creator economy is huge and that is changing how people are managing their money and how they're making money. Also, if you are a creator and you're making money from Instagram or YouTube, you're technically a 1099 worker. You're not a W-2 worker like a lot of folks know today, where they automatically take out your taxes, and they are, they're basically taking care of all the kind of like governmental engagement around work. But when you're a 1099 worker, it's a huge shift, which brings me to another kind of vertical here, which is just the freelancer economy in general. People are changing the way they're working, where it's no longer I have one source of income, therefore I have one way I need to manage it. But the future of work is a lot of people having multiple different forms of income that ultimately create a full-time salary. Other things that are jumping out there is obviously the Web3 world, investments, retail investments like Robinhood, Coinbase. We talk about all the things that we're seeing in crypto, and we're only seeing people that are super young and really taking a risk on that. Those are like the early adopters to investment, and us playing a role through Fintech to help teach these individuals how to do that in a responsible way, and also making it so they're thinking about it, 20, 30 years out, and they're not trying to become, young day traders. But there's a huge financial literacy gap that we can really play a role in there.
100%. And so one of the other big shifts that we've had is this idea that if before we had, and you mentioned this before, we had a few institutions that were able to deal with capital or to provide some mechanism for managing finances in all its forms. Today, we have so many different companies doing this, from early stage startups to growth startups. And so many more offerings. How is that changing, the market perspective on fintech now that, we have so many different players that maybe are fighting for those same eyeballs, fighting for that same customer behavior? Are there different understandings of who may come on top or what, or how the market is going to react to such a decentralization of services?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's one I thought a lot about. What we used to see is we have these like monopolies and duopolies in the market, where what we're starting to see is affinity-based fintech job or a company creation or affinity banking. When I say affinity, these are individual companies that instead of building products for the entire universe or all of America, they're building products for very, very specific communities. For example, you might build a neobank just for the African American community. Or, we just invested in a company called Copper, which is a bank for teens. Again, a teen is a very specific type of community, which is, it's an affinity relationship you're building. A bank built for the African American community, it's an affinity of a community. Also, there's another company we worked with called Daylight, which is doing it for the LGBTQ community as well. So what we're seeing here is these like very, very targeted, focused businesses built around a specific community that needs a very, very specific type of financial relationship and way of banking.
And so just specifically,
I'll tell you this,
you're mentioning communities and targeted. Is that mainly from a understanding that there's different consumer behaviors amongst different communities, different spending habits, different solutions that need to be tailored? Or is it more of from a marketing perspective, we'll be better off if we sort of position ourselves with this niche, because then we'll gain better trust, because finances is all about trust?
Yeah, so I actually say those go hand in hand.
Okay.
For example, the way, call it a lower to middle income African American, 25 something, engages with marketing is very different than if you were like, just call it Bank of America that's just trying to market to the entire country as a whole. So from a marketing standpoint, yes, you can be a lot more strategic and a lot more targeted. But from a product standpoint, and obviously product and marketing go hand in hand, yes, these are two completely different lifestyles. For example, with Daylight, the LGBTQ bank, there's a lot of people going through transition from, they're going to a transgender transition. And also what that means is your name is actually changing as well legally. So historically, if you were to walk into some of the banks that we grew up on, they wouldn't recognize your name change and even a gender shift as well. And so that's like it's a very important piece to the LGBTQ community, but not something that some of these traditional banks would even recognize. Or a very like rudimentary example for, a bank built for the African American community. I get a haircut twice a week. Like that is something that is ingrained in Black culture. Like we get haircuts, like that is something that we all do. Like if we have a cashback card with that bank, I should be getting cash back based on me getting haircuts, not necessarily me, doing something different. So like, these are like very like small things to some people, but within this like world of affinity fintechs, it becomes like really it's a huge opportunity to build a deep relationship based on how these people spend money and their very unique, very specific lifestyles.
So obviously there's, there's the more trivial consumer behaviors that we're converging to, and we understand that we need to tailor to, and we mentioned a few of them here. Are there larger ideas that, if you're looking a few years down the line, a few gaps that are still sort of not really tapped or people aren't necessarily giving enough attention to, that would be worth looking into when it comes to fintech generations or anything in between?
Yeah, totally. So a couple things. I'll keep going back to this freelancer economy. Yeah. Folks really are not focusing on the future of work enough. Like the future of work, especially in like this next generation of users that we see coming up, they see work different than our parents saw it. They want to have multiple different jobs. They want to have side gigs. They want to have anywhere between like 2 and 10 different forms of income. And this creates such an opportunity to help them better understand finances, better understand taxes, and to better understand like finance as a whole, as it pertains to America and even across the universe. We were lucky enough to see, again, the Ubers and the Lyfts and the DoorDashes and all these different delivery platforms, but literally anyone right now can get on, regardless if you make $100,000 a year or $10,000 a year, and go sign up and start delivering DoorDash. And that is just a different form of income. So that's one where I feel like there's so many things we can solve there. And then the other one is I still think there's just such a huge literacy play with crypto. I believe that crypto is here to stay. Yes, it's been a really tough market. But we have all these folks, especially low income communities, leaning into, purchasing NFTs, purchasing crypto, purchasing altcoins. And there should be a lot more focus on making sure that folks understand that market instead of just treating it like a day trading opportunity. And, the people that are most at risk here are the people that have the least amount of money. And so it's a really, really important opportunity from a literacy standpoint. And then the last thing I'll say is just ownership. Right now we're seeing fractional ownership pop up a lot, where you can buy like a piece of a real estate property or a piece of a share of Amazon. And so I think ownership, the definition of ownership, especially like hard to reach ownership things like houses and other stuff along those lines, it's significantly changing. So I feel like if people are looking to like really get into the space, especially entrepreneurs, like ownership is shifting and thinking about all the little things. We're seeing companies like Masterworks where you do it with art. We're seeing companies like Here where you can do it with short-term rental properties, or Picasso, like you can do it with long-term rental properties. But historically, these are things where you have to have millions of dollars to invest in. Now you can have $100 or $10,000 and get a piece of it instead of having to own the full thing.
Right. So, and this is, we're looking a few years back, fraction of shares from companies style what Robinhood did, and we're looking at. So you're saying, we're expected to see this downstream effect where a lot of these different assets that previously we, in our mind, we always consider them as, you have to have the whole piece in order to be the owner of it. Now, and obviously it's complicated because it requires a lot of logistics, right? It requires a lot of maintenance of data integrity, and how do you, and all these different edge cases on what happens when somebody doesn't fulfill the requirement, and which makes it difficult, especially during the way that fintech was before, with the centralization of who who can give you that ownership or that financial service, now we're going to be seeing a lot more solutions. And we're running out of time. This is a fascinating conversation, but what drew you to this world? So out of all the different things that you could have done in the space, why fintech and why this?
I grew up in East Oakland out here in California in a low to middle class neighborhood. A couple blocks over, it was fully lower income. Where I was, it was like lower to middle income. And, I grew up in neighborhoods where the majority of the folks I grew up around just didn't have access to financial technology, didn't understand and have the opportunity to learn, how to best manage their money and how to best grow their money and think 20 years out instead of, a year out. And there's the nationwide stat of 75% of Americans don't have $500 in savings in case of emergency. And so for me, getting into this fintech space was really around working with and investing in companies that are creating access and lowering the barrier of access to the folks that need help the most. And so when we think about what the future of fintech is, yes, we're talking about, the relationship with Gen Z and like teens and college students but at the end of the day here, it's really around making sure now that everyone has a cell phone in their hand, that everyone has access to the internet, and in most cases it's free. We're providing, I'm working with a lot of these companies and investing in a lot of these companies to make sure these are the ones that are lowering the access barrier for typically the people that were forgotten in America, which I'd call, the 90% of America that doesn't have the means or might be living paycheck to paycheck. But there's such an opportunity with where fintech is headed and the next generation of fintech, where from a literacy standpoint, from an innovation standpoint, like working with companies that are helping to build folks credit so they don't get into credit issues at an early age, which will impact how they're able to think about money at a later age. But building and thinking about this business and this world around lowering the access barrier and making sure that the 90% of America that typically and historically didn't have financial products built for them are having those products built for them now that can help improve their overall financial health and lifestyle.
Incredible. I think it's such an interesting space, right? And I'm looking forward to revisiting this conversation a few years down the line, looking back at what we discussed and seeing, what's happening. And obviously in 20 minutes, we can't dive nearly deep enough, but it was a fascinating conversation. So Drew, thank you very, very much. Best of luck with Fiat Ventures. I love the model, and it sounds like you also have a lot of fun doing what you're doing, which is the most important thing. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for the time, Michael. I appreciate it.